Hello and welcome to New Catholic Generation's movie review for I'm Not Ashamed. I'm David from Catholic Contrast, joined by Renee from Reborn Pure, Ned from Parables of the Film Industry, and a new special guest who came on because Joe happened to not be available the day we went to go see the movie, Sarah, who actually left us a comment several weeks ago on our YouTube channel wanting to be in a video, and so we had an opening, so she came along with us. And she happened to, I didn't even know you went to our university, which that turned out to be really
small
cool.
University.
Small university. It's a small university after all. Please don't sue us, Disney.
So for this review, actually, for the first time, we ended up filming our reactions, our thoughts before the film and then also after the film. So we have a lot of footage from the car. So we're currently driving outside of our hometown. Honestly, how am I going to say this?
Hometown of my college where we go to school, which is not our hometown.
We are driving to a theater to see I'm Not Ashamed because it was a limited release. It came out in only about 500 theaters. So we have to drive a bit of ways to see it. So despite some initial concerns that a lot of the internet had about this movie, especially coming from PureFlix, which has had some less than stellar movies in the past, at least in the opinion of a lot of people, this movie was not a complete train wreck. This movie, at least, yeah. There were many positive aspects to it. So one of the things Renee was thinking about before the film was this.
Well, when someone passes away, out of respect and love of that person, they're always displayed in a very good light, which is completely fine. But because of this fact, I believe that the movie will be over-dramatized to an extent, exaggerate the good qualities of the main character, which isn't a bad thing because we do owe her that respect and that great dignity for what she went through and at the cost of her life. But I am expecting the movie to be a bit over-dramatized, as Ned mentioned. I do kind of expect that just because of who we're portraying in this movie and what happened to them.
And here was Renee's reaction right after seeing the film.
I do think it's a good modern Christian movie in that it did depict a Christian being like a real actual Christian, like we were saying before. Like
a complex,
really
flawed
good
character.
And very important to have shown to today's world. The message was so big and so inspiring. You saw the contrast with these other aspects of the film they were trying to tie in there. But thank goodness this movie's out there because of the aspects that it presented that are so needed for the Christian stereotype, at least. That's what it was trying to fix. Just overall, this message is just so needed overall that I will encourage people to see it because it was inspiring. It inspired me in what I'm doing, what we're doing. We're getting there, Christian movies. We're getting there. I thought this was better.
I did go into the movie knowing that this was somebody that had passed away recently, and this was kind of a in memory of kind of movie. And so I did expect, and it was a little bit over the top in terms of how maybe she actually was. And that she did shine a lot in the movie, which was good for somebody who passed away.
Yeah, I mean, she was portrayed by the actor Maisie McLean, which I thought did a very good job. I know a lot of reviewers, especially just around the internet, even some of these secular people who don't really like Christian films, they were like, well, she did a great job. I hope she gets out of like the Christian ghetto of filmmaking.
They called
which
the
was
Christian ghetto?
Wow. But it's like,
ouch.
She did do a legitimately good job. And it was also interesting for me because after seeing the movie, I did go and read one of the books that has been published of Rachel Scott, which was her journals. Now, the book was not exactly her journals. It was mostly an author writing as if she was Rachel after she read all her journals and then interviewed people.
That's weird. Really?
It is kind of weird, although
Is it just because it's private?
Well, not exactly. Like when I first heard that, I was like, well, that sounds really iffy. But then once I read it, I kind of understood because they do include a lot of journal clippings throughout it. It's that because of the way the journal was structured, because she was writing notes to people here and people there, it really didn't make any sense narratively wise. So they included as much as they could, like the author sort of like making a narrative of her life, but including clips of her diary all over the place.
Okay.
And they did include some stuff that was relatively private, which I thought was one of the most redeeming aspects of reading the journal, is that it really got into a lot of the stuff that she was really worried about, her various crises of faith, a lot of the stuff she got into that was on the more shady side. I know one of the things she talks about in the journal, which I don't think they included in the film actually, was she got addicted to smoking for a little while.
I feel like it was kind of touched on in the film,
Yeah,
but
it
it
was touched
wasn't
on.
like a big, she's
Yeah.
now addicted to smoking.
Right.
Yeah.
When she kept hanging out with the smoking friends in the
Yeah.
smoking
Right.
corner of the school.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense now.
Yeah, which she talked about, like, in her journal, like, she wanted to be like Jesus, hanging out with, like, the people who were of the world.
Yeah.
But then she ended up becoming like them to a certain extent. So we talk about, like, not having Christian characters that are too idealized.
Yeah.
Was the portrayal of Rachel realistic?
I think Macy McLean, I think she did a phenomenal job with the movie. She was probably my favorite aspect of the film, and not only was her acting in general just like really good, I thought, like, I really, along with other people who reviewed this movie, I hope she does get other really, really, really good movies. I don't hope she gets out of the Christian ghetto, but I do hope that she gets, like, big movies in the future and stuff. I really did like her portrayal because I think this is, like, one of the very first examples of a flawed Christian that we've seen in, like, modern, like, Christian cinema.
Yeah, flawed, but not accepting of those flaws. Actively working on them and aware of them.
Exactly. A character who has an end goal, realizes that she has problems and everything, and wants to work towards becoming a better person. But sometimes she even falls back and goes back to those other problems and stuff, which I'm just like, it's who we are. We're fallen human beings. We sometimes, like, accidentally fall back and start doing the bad stuff all over again. And then we just get back up on our feet. In the case of being Catholic, go to confession and all that kind of stuff. And then we're like, okay, God, help me to start over again. And if we fall again, keep asking for forgiveness and everything.
Getting back up.
Exactly. We keep getting back up.
Christian films need realistic main characters, because I feel like with other Christian films that have come out recently, you have the Christians being, like, high and mighty and, like, not flawed at all, and that's just not realistic. Like, you can't identify with them. So this film did a good job of making her actually like a teenager who would go out and do things that were contrary to her beliefs, and then she tried to make up for them later.
And I have to admit, I was actually a little bit shocked while watching this. I'm like, holy crap, there's a makeout scene in this movie.
Yeah, that's another thing. Like, this movie included some aspects that I wasn't expecting. Like, usually these Christian films are, like, very, very sanitized. They don't accurately portray the world.
Yeah.
And in this one, yes, there were makeout scenes. People were wearing, like, high school clothing, like skinny jeans, tank tops, that sort of thing. And yeah, like, this movie was rated PG-13, which I guess you would have to do anyway, given that in the context of the subject. But yeah, I mean, it's also really important because, as you said, it makes it relatable. Like, for me, when reading Rachel Scott's diary, I was able to, the diary is written from this perspective of, like, one teenage girl, and then the target audience is teenage girls, but I was still able to relate to it in the matters of all the things Rachel's struggling with. And, like, I think that's a more accessible role model to somebody, because, like, if I read about, like, a saint that's just perfect in every way, like, I know we all have our struggles, we all have imperfections, we aren't able to be perfect people 24/7, and we all have tons of stuff we're dealing with on the inside. And to know that there are people out there who are struggling with a lot of the same things but can also overcome that is meaningful as well.
Right, yeah. It really, she personifies what the call to Christianity looks like from one of us, from a life like ours.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, another thing that I know you touched on in the clip, Renee, where you're talking about is meaningful to you in, like, the stuff that we do. One thing that touched me, I guess, in the film was when it keeps talking about how Rachel has a vision that, like, someday these hands will touch the lives of millions of people, and then they did. And it's sort of like, I think about it whenever, like, I'm talking with someone, or just, like, the impact we have on people's lives, like, not in the context of, like, doing YouTube videos, but just, like, in normal people's lives, you can have an effect on someone and not even realize it. Is something you say, you may be a role model for someone, you may be an inspiration, and you have no idea. But it's something to keep in mind, like, you can be something to somebody no matter where you are in life. It doesn't matter if you're just, we're working at your job and just being a smiling, friendly face to the person you meet that day, or if you're doing something more traditionally grand in scale, as it may think. So I thought that was an incredibly meaningful message to keep in mind for me.
Absolutely.
So I hope it's not like loosely based, how they take the characters and the events and then make their own story around it, because I could see that happening even though we do have these journal writings and, historical people to actually talk to.
I obviously understand that there are some movies that do need to like over dramatize like a real life event to go in, like to push forward like the plot or the real life event. Like one of my favorite movies that was based on a real life event was The Imitation Game with Benedict Cumberbatch. The movie was absolutely fantastic, extremely great, artistic and everything, but it did over dramatize some of the events that happened during the main character's life story. And I'm like, okay, well, you did it in a good, tasteful fashion, and you didn't try to push forward an agenda. Yeah.
And it's ironic is that I think one of the few criticisms of that film was some people who would agreed with the sort of agenda you could push from it wanted there to be an agenda.
Yeah, I know. That's the funny thing, because, it was wide open for an agenda, but yet there wasn't one, which I was so happy about.
The producer of the movie actually emailed us after watching our panel discussion, and they said that we worked very closely with the family of the girl, and that her mother is even one of the producers are involved in some high level. Obviously, I would think that you'd have to invent all the individual scenes, as you often do for a biographical piece, and the dialogue and stuff, but you could try and get the tone and the setting accurate.
So in terms of accuracy, I think that was something that hit a lot of us, where there were a lot of lines that felt sort of weird in the context of the movie, but then we ended up finding out, or at least through research, that those were actually things that were said in her diary. I know some of them because they were showing clips of her diary or journal in the credits scene. And we're like, oh, that's actually a quote. So it made more sense, which is an interesting case of just sort of being accurate to the original journal, but because it's sort of like a line that would sound cheesy in real life, it almost doesn't sound realistic in the context of the movie, even though it's accurate.
Well, what was one of the lines? I want to be Jesus Christ.
Yeah, so the quote was, "I am not a beer-chugging, pot-tripping, cigar-puffing, drug-dealing Christian. I am a God-loving, Satan-slamming, Jesus-freaking, world-changing Christian. I am a warrior for Christ."
Praise the Lord! Anyway.
No, but she literally says it like that to her friend in the movie.
You can tell
Out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere, yeah.
Look at this journal. You can tell it's all in caps. It's almost a little fun in there. I mean, of course, but and it's telling herself, trying to keep a little vow here that this is what I'm gonna be. I'm writing it in caps in this journal, and but for her to go and say it out loud would be a little funny.
I think there are things in journals, I don't know if you guys have ever journaled, but there are some things you write in there just for you, and that we don't anticipate in people saying. I feel like this is one of those things where she wrote it for her, and now it's not just hers.
And Frank problems. Yeah, maybe people who knew her would be like, "Oh, that's funny,"
Yeah.
She would say that, or I don't know.
Yeah,
but.
yeah.
I think the character of Nate was also really well done.
He was great.
I loved
Nate.
Nate.
Was
Research at the end here to figure out how much of that was real, because there were parts of him where I was like, was he really her friend? Was he a real person? Because sometimes these based on true stories movies will make up pivotal characters.
Yeah.
So I believe he's a real person, but he was just very well portrayed, and especially their relationship. When he was calling her out on some of her stuff, I'm like, that's what a real friend is. That she has inspired Christ in his life, and it was really helpful.
So Nate is a character in the movie that he's initially homeless, and Rachel ends up befriends and calling him her big brother, and they have a very close relationship, and it actually is based off a real person.
Okay.
So I actually have a photo of the real guy next to his actor in the movie. So that is the real guy.
Wow. With tats.
Yeah, I know. His tats are
The
even
same
more
tattoos.
intense.
They copied the tattoo.
Exactly. No, he looks pretty close, actually. Good casting.
No, that was good casting. Yeah. That's actually pretty cool.
So what did you guys think of the character?
I really liked him because he is the kind of like Christian character that I've always kind of wanted to see in a movie. Once again, has a flawed background and everything. Actually, not even like necessarily flawed. It was actually more tragic than anything. Not really flawed. But you know, he's like the Christian with tattoos. He's and all that kind of stuff. And I'm just like, you know, I'm glad this movie was not afraid of like show like going back to the realism kind of thing, not afraid to show a Christian with tattoos or stuff like that. There were a few moments, I think this goes back to like cringeworthy kind of moments, I guess, that I just thought his acting was a little bit like, what are you doing? Why?
Like what part?
I think it was when she's like, I was gonna kill myself, and he was like, let's pray it out.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
it was
that-
kind of like,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's hard to react to a situation like that if some friend
Yeah.
says that to you. But yeah,
I think it's more so because I have been, I have had friends who have thought about committing suicide and they have come to me about it, and yeah, I don't immediately go to, okay, let's pray about it, you know, let's bring you back to faith or something like that. My first thought is bringing their emotions down and bringing them back to a almost like a kind of like sense of not reality, because that doesn't sound
but
right.
like grounding them back.
Grounding them back, yes.
Yeah.
And making sure that they are okay. And then once they are calm, they are at a quote unquote sense of peace, that's when I bring in, okay, let's pray about this. And this, it was just like, hey, I thought about committing suicide. Well, we're very glad that you didn't. So how about we go and pray about it?
I wonder if that's
He was
all
like, "We
Nate knew how
missed
to
you."
do.
Yeah,
Do that.
yeah,
That's what he immediately
yeah,
suggested.
absolutely. And I'm not necessarily putting the moment down because I'm sure that there are some people who might do that, you know. But at the same time, like on a filmmaking perspective, once again, it just seemed really weird, and I didn't like that part about it.
Well, for one thing, I thought overall it was decently well made. It had beautiful camera shots, and except like for a few like weird grainy parts.
Yeah, overall, the cinematography was very, very good. It had like a few, if I'm remembering correctly, it had like a few like good like city shots and a few like really good like artsy shots and stuff like that, where it was like, wow, you did a good job. Yeah, the only part that was a little bit weird was like
It was during the party
Yeah, it was during
scenes
the party
especially.
scenes. Yeah, that had like really like weird grainy.
Hazy.
Well, it looks like
Yeah.
it was low light, and I guess either the cinematographer or the camera operator messed up, or they or they just didn't have a good enough camera. But it just looked like a situation where you have to crank up the ISO a huge amount to even see what was going on. And I guess they didn't do or it was too much to do any sort of like noise grain reduction in post. Or they didn't
Yeah.
like the way it looked. But yeah, it was just sort of like one of those things where it was sort of just it's really not that big of a deal. I just noticed it. We noticed it because we're film people.
It's
just
a
like,
nitpicky. It's a nitpick.
We realized there was an issue with the camera that sort of a bigger, huge Hollywood film production would not have. But
Yeah.
it didn't like ruin the movie. Obviously.
No.
I
At least
didn't
not
know
that.
That's why
These
Ned's
two
not
noticed.
buying it, because of the one grainy scene.
Yeah, that's why I'm not buying it.
No,
Sure.
there are more reasons why Ned did not like it. In fact, this was his initial reaction right after coming out of the film.
Let's relive it.
Here we go.
You had me, Christian film. You had me in the palm of your hand and you dropped me. I'm Not Ashamed was this close, literally this close. See, that's a very thin line. To earning my respect as a Christian film, especially like one of the like extremely like recent Christian films. But there were just a few elements of the film which I found just unforgivable.
And you could hear it every time too, because Ned would just go. I was sitting right next to him, and every time it was something.
Do you know what? This actually makes me more angry than God's Not Dead.
Oh, wow. What? What?
No, it does not.
Okay, God's Not Dead.
No.
God's Not Dead
No.
was God's Not Dead was an awful film because it like the whole thing made me angry. This film made me so like actually happy in some areas, and I'm like, wow, a flawed Christian character. This is beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh wow, this element was great. This element was great. Okay, that's weird and cheesy. Don't show the freaking shooters.
My main issue with the shooters, and this goes back to our trailer reaction of I'm Not Ashamed. They were portrayed in the exact way I thought they were going to be portrayed. Video game loving, metal loving punks. And that's the thing that I hated so much about this movie. And yeah, so I did some more research on this. And the thing is, the shooters clearly were mentally disturbed people, and apparently they had a very absent parenting. The parents were like very absent in their life and everything, so they did not have a guiding force within anything, and on top of that they were extremely mentally disturbed. One of the kids apparently had like really hardcore bad mental disabilities, while the other kid, he had like longer hair in the movie.
Yeah.
Apparently he suffered from severe depression and he hated life, and he really, really hated himself. He did not hate everyone else, he hated himself. But the thing is, once he became friends with this other kid, he started to take on more of his hatred for so many other things, including many of the people at Columbine. And the other thing that I found like extremely just awful about this movie is because they just kind of like focused on the, like I said, they focused on the video game metal loving punk aspect, and they were bullied once. Being bullied once does not constitute you going to read a book about Hitler and then wanting to go and shoot up the entire school. I am sorry, it really doesn't. It's unrealistic, it's stupid, and so many things. I'm sorry. Wow, I'm angry again. Anyway.
Well, I think this is a personal issue for you, Ned, because you enjoy a lot of the things that the shooters were portrayed doing. You enjoy wearing black a lot, which the shooters did throughout the movie.
Trench coats.
You enjoy metal music, and you enjoy video games. At one point in the car, you said,
Oh, yeah, this is really cool, you know, blah, blah, blah. If only this was like Columbine, yeah, we could totally make this like Columbine. And I'm like, no, movie, you're doing the bad. You were doing the good, now you're doing the bad.
No, it's true because, okay, so I wasn't raised on violent video games necessarily, especially because I was raised in a really heavy, like Baptist upbringing kind of thing. And it wasn't until like my later teenage years where I started to play kind of the more violent stuff. You know, I started playing Star Wars, which is, you could argue, is not violent, but obviously in some regards it is.
Yeah.
I eventually started getting into Mortal Kombat, which of course is a very violent video game, but once again, I'm at the age of reason where I understand this is fake. This is bad. I do not want to do this in real life, but God, it's so much fun tearing these people apart.
Digital people apart.
Digital people apart, obviously. So, and you know, other games, I'm not like a huge fan of like shooters and stuff like that. I think they're stupid, but that's just my personal opinion. I know some other people like stuff like Doom, God forbid, Grand Theft Auto, which is an entirely other topic, which I'm not going to get into right now. The modern warfare games and stuff like that, I personally don't like them, but apparently it was the video game Doom which, quote unquote, inspired these shooters to go ahead, these kids to go ahead and become shooters. Because it was during that time period where Doom was actually a really, really big thing. And up to a certain extent, I did do my research, they were slightly inspired. They were not entirely inspired by a video game to go ahead and like go and kill a bunch of people. Let me put it this way. They were already mentally disturbed. They were already holding an extreme, huge grudge against all the people at Columbine. They were basically treating it like the game was Columbine, and they tried to go ahead and like teach themselves, okay, this is that corridor, that is that corridor, and that kind of thing. So it wasn't inspiration, it was more so a like quote unquote like training thing for them to go ahead and kill everybody.
Okay.
Which, I mean, it's still awful. It's still an awful, awful thing. But to say that video games and metal are the harbinger of bringing out the evil in people is bad. Very bad.
Well, I guess the problem comes in where you have these mentally disturbed people, essentially, that use these things, and then every normal person who used these things ends up getting grouped in with them.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there have been many times, even times of me going to Franciscan University, a very Catholic, in a certain degree, non-judgmental school. And I was judged so many times for, like, I told them, I'm done with class. Where are you going? I'm like, oh, I'm going to go back to my room and I'm going to go play some Mortal Kombat. And immediately they were like, ugh. And I'm just like, to a certain degree, I'm like, I understand it's violent video. It's a very violent video game. But to another degree, they kind of like jump down the, you really shouldn't be playing that for your soul. And I'm like, bro. I have been playing this stuff for years, and so far, I'm not mentally insane. So far. And there were other times that, of course, I dressed in black, or one of my favorite activities to do around school was to dress up like the Joker.
Did that look like something that would fit my image?
And a lot of people were apparently worried for my mental stability because I loved to dress like the Joker. And I'm like, he's my favorite comic book character. I don't want to be like him. I just like his character and his story and stuff. I would never want to be a psychopath who goes around killing people just for the heck of it. Like, the villains hit me in all the wrong places because they were inaccurately depicted. They hit a place where I have been hurt for many years, and the problem that a lot of people really need to realize with these things is it's not the item or the topic which makes people bad, it's the way that people are raised. I know a friend who actually kind of had some of the same tendencies as one of the shooters, and he could have very well wound up as possibly one of those shooters just for the heck of it. And he is one of the greatest guys I know, and I am happy to call him my friend. And he's an extremely devout Christian and just a fantastic guy overall. And it's because of the way he was raised, he did not turn out bad. If we had more parents raising these kids who could possibly wind up being mentally disturbed or anything like that, or actually see the warning signs, then I'm sure that we wouldn't be having these issues today.
I don't want to blame like the culture, but I think there's a stigma around mental health and like video games, and like that just didn't help with this film because they didn't even talk about these kids' mental disturbance, and like that was such an opportunity for them to talk about something that's taboo still to talk about, and they totally missed it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
This film felt like it didn't know what it wanted to be, because it would cut from this scene like high school, this play, into like the shooters practicing shooting, and that really upset me because you can't just flip like that. No. And this movie was
like trying mood whiplash.
They tried to do all these different things and teach all these things, and some things it succeeded in, but other things were cringy and were upsetting to me. And there are events in my life personally that I think impacted how I saw this film. Like, I had a friend who died from a shooting, and so when they like showed the shooters like killing her, like spoilers, but I was like, that is really like, that is a close shot. That's a lot of information to take in, and
When they showed how right before she died, how her face just changed and she went into this place of peace, it gave a whole different vibe to her death and how she took it and where she was going and where she is now, and like that whole thing was shown in how she accepted That moment of peace that came over her was something that we know to only come from like God and come from hope. And that was a really beautiful scene for me.
There's oftentimes conflicting feelings you can have about scenes because it's the same thing as like just showing the shooters in general. Do you do it or do you not? On a filmmaking level, it makes sense to show them because they are very important characters and you have to develop them. And to show like even though I suggested not showing faces are how you show emotions. And I think you're right, Renee, in that you definitely see the emotions of Rachel when she's dying, and that's a very important moment to show. It would be difficult to just show it like from a distance or to just imply that it happened. Some movies that depict really bad events, if it's too close to something you've experienced, then it's probably not the best for you because it's not something you need to empathize with, because it's just, instead of portraying something on screen that you haven't experienced, it's portraying something you've already experienced and don't need like to be constantly reminded of. I know like trigger warnings have turned into a meme online and they're sort of made fun of, but I do think that's the original intention of it.
So there's a lot to unpack with the very controversial scene of them actually showing Rachel getting shot at the end by the killers, and then one of them asking her, do you believe in God? And she says, I do. And then, it's a close-up shot. She gets shot in the head. And this was actually the reason why the original trailer was not allowed on YouTube for several months. It was a big controversy because enough people complained that it was an offensive, inaccurate portrayal of the Columbine shooting. And so to clear things up at the beginning, there's a lot of controversy over whether the final scene or that scene is accurate. Like, was she actually a martyr? A lot of this controversy also stems from the fact that there was another girl that was in the library who was treated as a martyr. Her mother wrote a book. It was Cassie Bernal, and it came out later. It was based on some eyewitness in the library that said that she did the same thing as Rachel, but then it later turned out to be not accurate after a book had already been written trying to be inspiring in the same way. And so unfortunately that takes away a lot of credibility of a lot of these stories. The guy who was next to Rachel when she was shot, Richard Castillo, I don't remember how to pronounce his last name, but it's really hard to know what exactly happened looking at it, because supposedly he told Rachel's dad that what happened was what we saw in the movie, that she did say that. But then when he officially talked to the police, he didn't mention any of that. He just said that that she was crying and then she died. And the police thought she died very quickly. But later in another interview in 2012, he's gone back on it and he said, well, it was sort of like that. He can't recall for sure. So it's ambiguous at this point. He's already talking about he kind of wants to block it out of his memory. So
understandable.
So in the film, did he die though? Because I didn't realize that someone lived who had.
Yeah, in the movie it looked like he died.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So the guy, there were two. The first people shot were Rachel and one of her friends, Richard. They were both out front. Okay. Richard ended up surviving by faking death. He got shot in the spine. He actually got paralyzed, so he couldn't move. And so he just lit on the ground. He's and he survived. He's paralyzed now, but he lived, and he's the reason that we have this story essentially. But yeah, I don't know how much I can say just because I tried to research this and it's murky.
Very murky. Same.
On a gut level, I would have to say they probably shouldn't have included the scene, not only because of all the controversy, but because I think, as you said, Sarah, it was too much for you to watch.
I think it was distasteful just because it was so up close and it wasn't real footage. They cut to later, real footage from the news, and I don't know. I think it depends on the viewer, but I think as filmmakers and for their target audience, you just have to be prudent in what you're choosing to see. I think we said in the car later, if you were at Columbine, you just shouldn't watch this movie because it'd probably be a lot to relive that. Yeah. And even though I wasn't there, losing my friend was not like this at all. It was still too much for me to see her get shot in the head. So.
Yeah, like you said, there's a
it depends on the viewer. I'm glad you said that because to me it was definitely one of the most impactful parts of the film for me. But I haven't been through what you've been through with the people at Columbine. I mean, they witnessed all of it. I haven't, but I just saw like the reality of what she believed was there in her face at that moment for me.
Well, and I can see what you're saying, and I feel like maybe on a second viewing, like now that I know it's gonna happen, like maybe I'll see it differently, but it's pretty impactful. And there were other things leading up to that where I was already kind of like, this is a little too real for me, and yeah, but anyways.
It's one of those things where we also talked about in the car, should they have shown the shooters at all? It makes me wonder if a movie was not the right medium for this story.
Yeah.
Just because, I mean, yeah, we talked about, isolating Rachel's story overall, we really liked it.
Yeah.
Overall.
Yeah.
I would have to say, reading the journal, which did not focus on the shooters at all, except until the end where it just said, like, she died. That was a much better, for me, getting to understand Rachel's story and her perspective and her stuff without any of this shooter narrative added in, which I guess, from like the filmmaking standpoint, as I said in the clip, you got to include this stuff to narratively work. But then if you got to include it, then maybe you just shouldn't do the movie at all, because it's just like...
Or figured out another way to still tell the story, but maybe just have... I get you can't just have the shooters come in at the end without ever seeing them, but when you show the faces of like the perpetrators, like that was the intent. Like they wanted to be famous. They wanted everyone to know that this is what they did.
Is it glorifying them?
Yeah.
I thought it was distasteful, mainly because, so I am an uncle of 20 kids. So I have a really big family, guys. And let's just put it this way. There are some of my nieces and nephews I look to in a way as if they were my own child. To a certain degree, because I was raised around them for so long. I took care of them. I changed their diapers, and all that kind of stuff. If something like that, if something like Columbine happened to one of them, and this sort of similar story happened to them, I would not want that scene to be in the movie, because I thought it would be utterly disrespectful and distasteful. Now, I don't know how the mother feels about it, and if the mother feels differently about it, then it's all good. It's what maybe, quote unquote, what she wanted.
I mean, I guess so, because she was one of the producers.
Exactly.
But that is also, I guess just to address this, because this is what all the atheists circulate around, or at least from what I'd seen, their perspective of it is that the mother is milking it. And saying like the dad's not involved in this stuff. The dad was not involved with the movie. The mother's the one who's done like the speaking tour and the television appearances and all the books. And they're saying, well, she's getting a lot of money for this, which again is what the mother of the other girl that turned out to have the fabricated story had. So it's just like it's uncomfortable implications.
Yeah.
And I feel like for me, where do you draw the line with what you show, what you don't show? Like. I feel like most of the things they showed were essential to the story. Like without it, the movie would have felt weird. But there were some things with the shooters in particular where I don't want to say they didn't show enough, because I already feel like they showed a lot of the shooters.
Too much.
Yeah, there were some conclusions I just feel like it jumped to. And I really wish they had talked about the mental health, because that was such a missed opportunity. Even with Rachel, there are points where they talk about, her mental state. And that made me happy, because like that is a reality. And it's something we need to talk about.
Speaking of your point, actually, I either wish that they really touched into the family life and the mental life of the shooters and actually showed where they were at, instead of just like kind of like sidelining them as video game bullied once obsessed people.
And as good as that would have been for film, I can already see tons of red flags.
Exactly.
Like they couldn't have.
No, exactly. And I already know that wouldn't have worked. So, and I'm going to go back to the Imitation Game again.
Yeah.
And we know in the Imitation Game, they do not show one Nazi in that movie. We know the Germans and the Nazis during World War II were the bad guys. We know what they were doing. We know what they were up to. The main struggle in the movie was Benedict Cumberbatch's character and the things that he was going through and the things that he was trying to do to save everybody. Now, you could argue that in this, and I'm Not Ashamed, we kind of got that same mentality with Rachel. She was going through a lot of struggles and through a lot of purity problems and a lot of other things. And at the same time, she was trying to save everybody. You could have gotten a clear-cut good movie with just that. And because we already know who Rachel is. We already know what Columbine is. We know the history. We know everything about it. If you were to go ahead and show that and then showed the very last part of the movie where Rachel and her friend Richard look and say, oh, what's that? That looks weird. And is this a joke or kind of thing? And then it cut there.
Yeah.
And then you heard the shootings and the screaming and all that kind of stuff and whatever. Yeah. I think that would have been almost more impactful because you saw this girl's story. You only saw this girl's story. You saw all the good that she did. You saw all the struggles that she went through. And then you see her life abruptly end. And I think that would have, heck, I would have been crying throughout that entire movie. But with all the stuff that they showed, I thought it was just extremely unnecessary and in extremely poor taste.
With the clip of Rachel's death, you know how I feel about that. Like, it was an important scene for me. And then I feel like there were more stereotypes in the movie besides just the shooters as well. Like the girl who dressed in a skimpy outfit was the one that went and messed around with tons of guys. Yeah. And I could see maybe if someone like dresses like that to be artsy as well or whatever, like they could be like, well, you know, we don't all do that. The jocks too were all made to look like big bullies.
The jocks were bullies.
Yeah, except for that one guy who came out and converted from the jock ways. You know,
he had his cross under the jersey.
You know, right. I saw that. I disagree a little bit with Ned on how strongly they portrayed the shooters as being associated with the wearing black and the video games. And what was the other thing?
Listening to
metal too, yeah.
I didn't even notice that the first time around. I guess just because I wasn't listening to it. Ned recognized the metal.
For me, knew what bands they were. For me, since the beginning, it was strongly emphasized that this kid had mental disturbance, and that was really, really emphasized. And then it seemed from my perspective, he went to anything he could get his hands on. He was like, oh, we have a shooting game. I'm interested in shooting up the school.
The Hitler book.
The Hitler book, the dark metal music. I'm thinking like, if this guy had parents, he might have known like these parents might have not even liked that stuff, or other kids would have been scared of that stuff because it's just a fact that some people are, and that's why you're mad about it and so proactive about changing that is because it's a real thing. A lot of Protestants are afraid of it in a way. They're afraid of their kids being exposed to it, and then the kids are they grow up believing like to avoid that as well, or to avoid someone who is into that stuff because they could be dangerous.
Exactly.
And so that comes through the film. It looks like the shooters used that to walk around in black and blast that music and whatnot to initiate that fear they knew other people had, as opposed to it just. Even though, like, I know it annoys you, Ned, because it can go to, let's say a mom goes to the movie, sees the shooters playing the video games, wearing the black, listening to metal, and goes, my kid listens to metal, he's got to stop doing that. You know, if that would happen, it seems like it is going down.
It's gone down quite tremendously.
So I don't know if the mom would immediately be like, not. But
I think it more so just annoyed me because that was the big thing back then. I have experienced it here at Franciscan and a few other places. So, like, in that regard, it frustrated me. But I know that has gone down quite tremendously.
Yeah, there's just like, but there still is that fear of that stuff.
Yeah.
And even me personally, I don't want my kids into that stuff before a certain age, like at all.
No.
And some people mature at different levels and different ages too. So, and some people have mental problems as well. And so it's still something to be very careful about.
Yeah.
unless you have the right perspective on it and see it for
That's why I mentioned like about like the whole raising thing and like how children are raised, and you don't raise your kids on that.
Yeah.
You wait until they get to a certain point and all that kind of stuff.
Now, Ned's one of the nicest guys I know. I don't think that the black metal or any Mortal
Black metal.
Oh gosh,
Not the black metal.
I don't think
Not
the
the white
metal
metal.
or the Mortal Kombat has influenced Ned's view of human dignity in others and respect of other human beings, and how highly he holds human life or anything like that at all. But it's still, in my opinion, something to be very careful about when if kids get introduced to it.
Absolutely.
And don't know how to approach it, maybe if they have a mental problem, etc., like I said. But anyway, so in that movie, it's okay, this might annoy you, but it made sense to me a little bit. That
No,
it was
no,
like that.
no.
And that the
it's
shooters
fine.
used those things. And
Like David said, in a narrative sense, it makes sense. In like a real life situation, like I didn't agree with it because it wasn't accurate and stuff like that. But in the movie, obviously it makes sense to show that because it's what shot them forward, it's what inspired them, and it's what got them going and stuff. So
wait, what do you mean it's not like realistic?
but because in their real life situation, that's not what happened.
In the real story, they were not. Well, okay, you just said they were slightly influenced by video games, a little bit. And that makes me think like they got their hands on anything they could. Like, oh, there's a shooting video game, we'll use that too. After they already had the mindset.
So that's what, So
okay,
the problem I had with the movie was that it looked like that's what solely inspired them.
I disagree on that point too, because I don't think it looked like that's what soily.
Okay, good. Soily. Okay.
Cleveland accents.
Okay.
I don't think it.
Okay.
I don't think it looks like to me that it solely inspired them.
Maybe I think it came out a little bit wrong or something. I don't think it necessarily mean like it solely inspired them. I think that what I was thinking was. That was like the tipping point. That was the tipping point.
It went into their inspiration to go actually do it.
Yes. Mm-hmm. When in reality, it was more so a buildup of a lot of other things, and the video game wasn't even an inspiration for them to go ahead and kill people. They already wanted to go kill these people.
Yeah, I got that because of the first way they showed them being bullied, and it could have been shown being bullied more.
I mean, maybe another way to think about it is that, like, I know this is something we didn't even touch upon, but the other thing the shooters use is guns.
Yeah.
And I know Ned, you're not a big gun guy, but
I'm
yes,
not a big gun
this is
guy.
it's like the same thing with the whole gun debate.
Like
a normal person can use a gun, a mentally deranged person with a gun
should not use a gun.
Right.
It's all behind all of that. There's one big theme. It's called evil. It's called wickedness.
Yeah,
it's
of
called
course.
sin.
Yeah,
And I know people. I'm not saying that all. I'm definitely not saying that people who have those mental problems and have those tendencies are evil because they make that choice. Because obviously there's some lack of will there almost because of how their brain works. But when it comes to the guns, the video games, the target practice.
They made bombs. That was something in the film. I was like, how did they make a bomb?
They made bombs. I think in situations like this and all the bombings we have today and all the shootings we have today, he was mentally ill. He was mentally ill. He was mentally ill. Okay, if someone's actually mentally ill, okay, but they never say like this was an evil act. I wish they could emphasize that more in our world.
Yeah,
people are making choices,
and it's
that
I guess
they
you feel like
have
it's almost excusing them in a way.
Yeah, it's like
building a
mentally ill. They couldn't choose to do the good.
No, and it's building the
absolutely.
stigma. People aren't talking about the other aspects of why these people are shooting at schools. And so now mental health is getting such a negative stigma. It's like, oh, if you have depression, you're going to become a shooter. And like, that's just not true.
No.
And it paints people who are living their life like a normal, like, girl in college who has depression. Like, that doesn't mean she's going to do all these things. And I could rant about it, but
but gosh, these people can be mentally disturbed from being abused in their life for so many reasons.
Absolutely.
So many reasons. But what happens at the end of the day is not of God. It's evil to me.
Absolutely.
So, and I can understand why Ned was upset that they tied that evil vibe so much with things that, they tied it with guns, they tied it with the video games, they tied it with the metal music and stuff. Too much for Ned when he's so proactive in showing that those things are not just that.
Yeah,
It's
the actions, and it's the way that you think about things, and how you move forward and go for, and the way that you view life, and like you were saying, your overall actions is what defines you at the end of the day.
And the results of that action,
not good.
It really gets me when like every news starts like, oh, they were mentally had a mental thing, because it's like mental health is already stigmatized and people already are like scared of it, and
a depressed person can make a good and bad choice. It's a choice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and it affects different people. So like mental health, it's a spectrum. It hits me too personally.
Yeah. Right. I think that's why this movie hits us in all the wrong places.
In the wrong and
you
the
and
right.
me,
the wrong and the right.
Can I say Cameron McKendry did a good job, as well as the boyfriend who didn't want to commit. I thought his acting was very good, and he was very accurate to some things I have seen in my life. Not that I had an uncommitted boyfriend. That's not
Renee's calling out her exes.
All you fanboys, get out!
Oh my goodness. No, but anyway, I'm glad he portrayed that character so that maybe some people in the audience can be like, oh, let's not be like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All those high school boys watching this movie. Weren't there a lot of old people in the theater when we went?
Oh. Yeah, we were like, there was like all old people, and then like one other family, and then there was us.
Yeah.
Wait, was that movie where there was just the row of old ladies in front of us?
Yeah, that was the movie.
We usually do ratings at the end of this, but can we even rate it?
Out of respect for Rachel, let's not rate this movie.
I would say.
That's what I would say.
It's a memorial movie, and I feel bad even
critiquing.
No, yeah,
critiquing it in the first place.
Here's the thing: is like what I would say if I had to rate it is like I have never felt so conflicted about a movie because I want to give this movie such a positive review and such a negative review at the same time, just because I loved all the positive things.
Absolutely.
As I talked about at the beginning of this panel, I got some really great messages out of it. It's just the inclusion of all these things. You saw it in like our conversation. It set all of us off in different ways. It's just it
did set us off in different ways.
It's like which is why I would recommend the book. Yeah, just because the book you get so many great messages, a lot of the same messages as the movie. Yeah, without all the stuff that's so controversial and just like
But
can I for a second?
Yeah.
I wouldn't rate it. I would just say to watch it because it was good enough, and I think that the things it did right, it did really right. So I would still recommend it, and not even say give it a number. I would just say to watch it.
Especially after we've reviewed it all here, we brought up the points. You know what you're gonna see now. And you know what
all the spoilers.
You know
exactly
what we think should have been different, and now you know probably you might agree with us here at the panel on certain issues, and you're going in now with a better
even like I also did a review of this, guys, and even like I said in the review that even though I personally would never go and buy this movie after seeing it once, I would not say to someone who is interested in seeing it, I would never tell them to not go see it, because the story of Rachel is amazing.
It's amazing. It's a true story.
I loved her story, and like I said, I did cry at the end of this movie because it was so good.
Yes.
It's just on the personal level, it hit me in all the wrong places, and I would never buy this movie. But let me put it this way: for people who have an actual good head on their shoulders and know how the world works, I would say go ahead and see this movie. Because you will ignore all those other parts and you will focus on Rachel. And it's Rachel who is the focus.
Like I said, she
Rachel
shines.
is the
great actress for the part.
Rachel is the focus. Keep your eyes on her. Keep your eyes on her story, and keep your eyes on her life, on her beautiful life message.
Maybe it's like you talk about oftentimes you like movies with extended cuts. Maybe a reduced cut.
Please
we're gonna cut every scene with the shooters except
no, seriously, if we cut out every scene with the shooters, I would be like,
then I'll buy the movie.
We'll make a Ned cut.
Make the Ned cut. Actually, no. Do you know what? Let's actually make it respectful. Make it the Rachel cut.
Yeah. Ned did a review on his channel, so Ned's channel will be linked to the end. Sarah also has her own YouTube channel if you'd like to check it out. She'll be linked to the end.
And to one of the film's producers who contacted us over email, and to the whole cast and crew of this movie, we want to say thank you for sitting through this and letting us pull it apart in our own special way that we do with all of
If
our
any of
movies.
you are watching, yeah.
And thank you for sitting through the parts where we heavily criticized it, and we're glad you got to see the parts where we really, really loved it, because we did. We all cried. We all recommend it.
We did.
Thank you so much.